in a backyard ultra or an Arrowhead, I get to have that moment of reflection during the race. During BPN, I would lay on the trail and I would put my hand in or my head on my arm and I would think, this is so hard. But I want to put myself in 24 hours from now, Mark, if I decide that this is my last loop, I want to put myself in that chair and I want that Mark to ask this Mark, did you give everything you had? And the answer is no, I still have more to give.
And welcome back. We have Mark Dowdle joining on the podcast today. Mark, thanks so much for taking some time to chat here on For the Long Run.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Of course, first question's a tough one. You've been prepping for your whole life. Who is Mark?
Who is Mark? Yeah, that's a tough question. It's a tough question because there's a lot of different identities and characteristics that make me up. But I think at my core, I am a person who is trying my best to see what I'm capable of in this life and experience suffering in a way that will bring me closer to my faith in Jesus Christ and bring me closer to the shared suffering that we all go through as people on this earth. And how I do that is many different ways, but I think at the core of who I am is someone who suffers, enjoys this process of suffering and what it brings me into other people.
We're going to dive right in. We're going to skip all the small talk. This is going to be a good one. I heard on a podcast earlier today, curiosity is the compass. What is it about the suffering and the curiosity of how you can persist that fires you up?
I think that it reveals exactly who I am in that moment. Like there is, I think through backyard ultras and the Arrowhead 135, two races that I've really leaned into over the last several years, is there is a lead up to these moments where I have a belief about who I am and about how I'll respond to adversity when it arises. And then when I get to that moment, I'm confronted with the decision to either be the person that I believe that I am or fall victim to all of the excuses and justifications that I have to walk away from that experience. And I like to learn how I communicate to myself in those moments because each time it's very different. Each time there's different levels of comfort that are pulling me to walk away, or there's different motivations and drives that keep me going out there. And I like to know who I am, not who I think I am, who I believe I am, who other people think I am. I like to know because I think in those moments that gives me confidence to move forward and have just a stronger belief in what I'm doing and who I am. And so those moments are opportunities for me to really get in deep and connected to who Mark Dowdle is.
Has that always been your experience as a runner, or was there sort of like a warming up point where you wanted to do more and you weren't as like mentally strong as you're speaking about now?
I don't know if I would have been able to articulate it in the manner that I am able to today, but I think from the very beginning, there was always this curiosity to learn about myself in that way. Like I was a college football and lacrosse player. Running was not a part of my existence per se. And in those sports, it was very much detaching from thinking about who I was because it would be like get drunk on the weekends, wake up with shame and regret, bottle that up, and then allow that to build until Saturday came where I could inflict all of that pain that I was building up onto somebody else. And that was the cycle that I was in. And when I found running after college, it was the first time where I was actually able to process the emotions that I was going through and come back from a run and feel a weight off my shoulder. And through that, just like that, I have only just continued down of like, okay, who am I? How do I process hardship? Whether that's in my personal life or out there on the course. And so very early on, my running was centered around that. Like the first big runs that I did were these charity runs called Love Like Glory Legacy, where we raise money, started a nonprofit for pancreatic cancer because my teammate for football and my friend now still today, his mom passed away from pancreatic cancer. So that whole 3-part run series was all centered around this like shared suffering. I don't know what it's like to lose my mom, but in this physical suffering that you're participating in with, we can work through those problems together. We can talk about it. We can remove all of the masks because that's what running does when you get so deep into it. And so from the very beginning, it's been all about that.
So I've done a little reading on your story. David Goggins, entry
Yeah.
point, as we've heard many times.
Yeah, the greatest ultrarunner of all time.
Yeah, pretty fascinating
I'm just kidding.
mental approach to doing things with broken legs and whatnot. But
Yeah.
okay, so you're inspired to do the thing. What happens first?
So yeah, the bus ride that I learned about Goggins, it was a 3-day weekend for lacrosse. We lost 2 games. I was sitting back of us all bummed out. My brother in that podcast, I learned who David Goggins was. I learned what ultra running was from that entry point. Our bus gets back from Nashville to St. Paul at 2 a.m. The first thing I do is go for a run. And I decided that spring I was going to wake up every day at 3:30 in the morning and go for a run just to like eliminate all my excuses. To me, it was like this. I had watching David Goggins was a man that transformed his suffering and his pain into something meaningful. And he did something with that. And that's what attracted me to the running aspect of like, I can feel all of these doubts. I can feel like I'm less than, I can feel like I'm not good enough. But when I wake up at 3:30 in the morning and I go for a 3-mile run, I'm taking action with the pain that I feel and the doubts that I feel, and I'm doing something with it. So that was like the first thing that I did.
Sahil Bloom talks about how it's hard to beat someone who wakes up at 5 a.m. You're doing it at 3:30 in the morning. But like someone who has the practice of waking up and doing something that makes them better every single day and making it non-negotiable, like at baseline, all else equal, that person will do more than the person next to them. How did that unfold, and what other things did that set in motion by setting that framework of no questions asked, you're doing the thing every single day? What did it unlock for you? What did it show you was possible?
I think the running showed me that I didn't have to feel that way anymore. I didn't have to just accept my situation. I actually could do something very small in a 3-mile run and not get hung up on this is how it always has to be. And I think it just unlocked that possibility that like, Goggins was an inspiration for me for some time. But then after going through, the last 4 months of college, I'm like, I don't want to be David Goggins. This sucks. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And, I listened to a bunch of Rich Roll who kind of has a completely different perspective on things. And just hearing stories about people who had transformed their life using endurance or using running or using just making better decisions, it gave me hope that I didn't have to live the way I was currently living for the rest of my life. And I think it just turned that on in my brain where it's like, okay, I don't know entirely what to do, but I know that I'm better off when I go out for a run.
You've picked up a pretty large following on social, so clearly it's resonating with other people along the way. Why do you think the way that you've shared your story, or how is the way that you're sharing your story resonating with other people?
I think I just try and be as
Human.
real. Yeah, yeah, human. Like before, there's been a ton of opportunity that's come out of winning the BPN Go One More, growth in following, growth in opportunities from sponsorships. Like all of that has been great. Leading up to that, I was working 3 different part-time jobs, stacking my schedule, being a youth baseball umpire, washing windows, doing event setup, like all these different things. And I think that connected with people that I have this dream. of being a professional runner, but it's not working out the way that I thought it would, but I'm still willing to do whatever it takes in order to support that dream. And then when I have that dream become a reality and I have the sponsorship opportunities, they still see me going out to umpire, because the thing that makes me who I am is not necessarily the running, but who I am through the running. And I can be that person as a youth sports umpire. I can be that person as a window washer. And yes, my hours will greatly reduce in those areas, but running is what I do. It is not who I am. And I think the way that I do content is trying to start from that foundation of how can I show people who I am through these different avenues that I do. And I think that connects with people way more than like, hey, I ran 300 miles. Like, most people don't connect with that. They can't comprehend that in any capacity. And
Right.
so I want to take what I learned in that and break it down into something digestible that then they can bring to something outside of running.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the first person that kind of tipped me off to the storytelling that you're doing was Peter Bromka, and Peter's a 219 marathoner who spent years trying to break, or 218 trying to break the OTQ, and built a really high quality following from people who really appreciated seeing him put a goal out there and come up short a couple of times, and just like he wore his heart on his sleeve. And running as a sport just like broke his heart over and over and over again, and he continued to do it, and he never OTQ'd, but he came within 3 seconds of it. And from a storytelling perspective, it's like better to shoot and miss than shoot and score, because it's more relatable. And it sucks for him that he never like got that finish. But anyway, so when he was like, hey, you should check out Mark, I was like, oh, that recommendation carries a lot of weight because of how creative and passionate he is around the storytelling. And he comes to it from an elite road running background, who's now getting into trail. But it's fascinating to see just how like multi-dimensional and so many different domains are of interest these days. You have road, and within road you have track and marathon and road ultras, and within trail, like you have the backyard ultras, you have the Cocodonas, you have, fast 50Ks. And it's a really cool time to be a fan of the sport and to be in the sport. But to your point, like watching somebody run 300 miles across a state or something, like I'm a guy with 450 podcast episodes talking to trail and ultra and road runners, and like I can't even fathom doing that. It's like not relatable to me, and I'm like the tip of the spear, creating and consuming mass amounts of content. So I love that point. Like you're doing things in a more relatable way just by seeing what's possible.
Well, I think what's helped me too, especially as of late, is to think out loud and let that be the content. Like, I made a post the other week. Barbell is one of my sponsors, and I am like I hate it with a passion, any type of content where I feel like I'm trying to sell you something. Like, it makes my skin crawl. But then there's also an aspect of like, I'm a sponsored athlete and I have to make people know, aware that they can buy product and support me and the brand that's supporting me. And so I made a video. I was just saying, guys, I'm going to be honest. I hate talking about my sponsors because I never want to force something down your throat. But I'm just going to tell you why I'm partnered up with Barbell. And I went into just a testimony about a relationship moment that me and the director of partnerships had. And the amount of people that reached out to me and said, like, I don't know why, but I love that. Like, I want to buy a shirt now just because of that. And so I think just like thinking out loud and being honest about the ways in which I feel uncomfortable, or maybe it's not like a fully fleshed out idea or thought, but being able to do that as if I'm doing that with my wife or with a friend that's on a run. You go on a run and you're just like, you're talking to a friend about a life problem that you're going through. you don't have all the answers. That's why you're going to them. That's why you want to talk to them so you can work through that. And that's the approach that I'm trying to take to social media, is just work out the things that are going through my mind as if it's me writing in my journal.
I love that. And it's something I resonate with. I had a full-time job for a number of years. I worked at a company for 10 and a half and I left it in June. And so for the longest time, like the brand partnerships weren't putting food on my table and paying my mortgage. And as of June of last year, like they are. And so I need them to work. And
Yeah.
at the same time, like I don't want to stuff things down people's throats unless it's Good Ranchers, which tastes great when you stuff it down your throat.
Get your Good Ranchers.
Meat delivery.
Yeah.
No, but jokes aside, like I don't want to do that, but it's like it's a necessary piece of the puzzle. So for me, I'm exploring ways to like, how do I create revenue that doesn't require brand partnerships, or
Sure.
can be more behind the scenes related to the brand partnerships, but in the meantime, it's still like an essential piece of the puzzle. And there's just like so much noise out there when it comes to products. And you go onto Instagram and it's like you're scrolling through billboards. And so I wrote this piece about the Mount to Coast activation from Boston. They did a double Boston, and I was like, if your marketing if you can just swap out the logo, and if it works for another brand, like you're contributing to the noise and it's boring. But if you're doing something that's like uniquely specific to that brand, like you're doing something interesting and it's worth talking about, it's worth promoting, it's worth sharing. So like I'm trying to find ways to do it that's differentiated enough, but still I feel the same way of like, I have like 5 partners for every podcast at this point, and these are all things I use and love. But sometimes it feels like quite commercial.
Sure.
But that's what it takes to like keep the engine running and pay the bills.
Yeah. What would you say as far as like the Nike ad for Boston?
So I think Nike used to stand for something. And they knew their audience, and they knew who they were talking to. They were talking to the people chasing OTQs and things like that. And at a race that's literally by definition an exclusionary race, it's okay to exclude people. Like the race excludes people. 80% of the race cannot walk in their marathon in order to get in. Like I ran a 2:59 marathon, and that wasn't fast enough to qualify for Boston. I was excluded from Boston. Like I think it's okay. At the Tuscaloosa marathon or the Kansas City marathon or Miami marathon, like that would have been an egregious statement to make. But at the Boston Marathon, like let it rip. Stand for something.
I agree, and I think they made a mistake by taking it down or retracting it, because like that was. What you said earlier of like, if you can replace another brand's logo for it, then you're just adding to the noise. And I don't think you can do that with a statement like that, because it is so much Nike. Like that is who they are.
Right.
So, but you and I have that too. Like, and it's maybe more difficult from a personal branding perspective, but like who we are, there's an identity we have that our friends are able to identify within us, that can only take place through the message that we share.
Yeah, and I think the authenticity piece is a huge part of it. Like I went the first 6 years first 10 years of making content, not needing the money that I received from brand partnerships. It was a nice to have. And so it kind of like trained my audience that like, if you hear something from me, it's because I love it. It's not because I need it or want it. And I've tried to hold that true still. Like I won't say yes to anything, and I say no to, I don't know, 90% of opportunities that come my way. Just because once you burn that trust, it's really hard to get it back. And so I think that's like, we're seeing the creation of AI influencers, and I was like, please make it stop. Like this is ridiculous. The trust is the moat. The trust is the piece that is the most important. And when you have a nameless, faceless, AI powered UGC creator, like who cares? It's not interesting at all.
creating the piece of content or the impact of that content. Like if you knew, so let's say somebody who is an influencer or it's AI where they are sharing this message about them running, but they're only running for that 10-second clip and then they go home, but it's impacting a whole bunch of people to run. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
So net, I think it's a good thing. I think that's like a lot of the conversation around influencers running major marathons. Like they're not being hired to run the majors because the majors need more participants. Like London had 1.2 million applicants. Boston had, more than ever before. I think a lot of it is running is growing and influencers who are being platformed at these large events, that's creating this groundswell of people that are curious to try the thing. Like Rachel and Trenkin was talked about on Part of the Interruption on ESPN
I know,
yesterday,
dude, that was so cool.
right? And so like Courtney DeWalter going on Joe Rogan, these types of things that um it transcends, a niche running podcast that gets a few thousand downloads and it goes on to something that's getting tens of millions of views. That's not really answering your question, but I think the upside is the more people that run, the better, and whatever the
Yeah.
vehicle is to make that happen. So for me, that's like why I'm so passionate about representation. And like my friend who's an Indian American bought a running store in San Francisco, and he's like, I want more Indians to feel comfortable on the trails because
Mm,
running has given so much to me, and
yeah.
I've seen what running has done for me, and the transformative approach, the transformative nature that it's had and the power that it gives me. And like that's something that everybody deserves and that everybody should be able to benefit from. Because if Dylan Bowman jokes all the time, trail running will save the world. Like truly would if everybody
Yeah. Yeah.
ran. Like we are more similar than we are different. And we believe in different religions or we look differently, whatever, but ultimately everyone just wants to like feel like they're a part of something and be better tomorrow than they were yesterday. And running enables that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was your buddy's story is reminds me of listening to Tommy Runs on Cam Haynes's podcast the other day. He's going to be doing Western States this year, and he's only been in the kind of trail running scene for the last year. But he's like, I want other Black people to see me do this thing and know that they can do it too. Like you said earlier, of like how that gets done. There are net positives to it all, and I think what some people are missing the point on when it comes to like the BPN race. A lot of people like, well, they're not, they're not an ultra run, like they're not part of the running community in the way that it's like the amount of people that DM'd me or found a way to contact me to say that they're running their backyard after watching BPN will only help the people in the space that I think deserve all the credit in the world, like the Phil Gores, like the Harvey Lewises, even though those guys have really made a name for themselves. But there's other people that go to bigs or go to these big, long world record performance races in the backyard ultra that now more people know about this race and will be curious about how people do at the top level. So everything's going to rise now because of that.
I think looking at what BPN has done is a wonderful case study in how to create a groundswell of momentum that ultimately benefits a variety of different buckets. The net of more people learning about running and more people learning about a brand that introduced them to running. It's a pipeline for both more
True.
runners and more customers. And so it's also fascinating because the BPN Go One More, the Backyard Ultra, didn't get a lot of coverage in like traditional, like mainstream trail running or ultra running circles. But if you looked on YouTube and if you looked on like Instagram, the view count was insane. It was way more
Yeah.
than like most other things. And so it's one of those things where it's just like play the game, not the scoreboard. Um, but the scoreboard also reflected that they're winning. And so like they were doing something that was uniquely BPN and demonstrating that when they do something that's very on brand, it puts eyeballs in the right place and creates the action that ultimately brings more people into running and brings more people into the brand.
Love to hear your perspective on why you think it didn't get a lot of the mainstream trail running notoriety. I think there was like the single track podcast I know talked about it. Um, there were a few people that like you couldn't. It was almost there was so much attention around it. Some people were like, "We got to talk about this." But why do you think it hasn't been a part of the bigger conversation as not just like an outsider to what everybody else is doing?
Yeah, I think it's a perception of the brand and the perception of the brand as like for hybrid athletes, which I think is a misconception, right? Like Nick is in it. Nick is running fast marathons. Nick is doing Ironmans, and he's wearing it. And it's it's a tough question because it's getting a lot of coverage in like certain areas within running. But if you go to a trail race and you ask 100 people, like, have you heard of the BPN Ultra or BPN broadly? They maybe 10% would say, "Hey, I think I heard about it from Sally," and the rest would say, "No, I don't know what you're talking about," which almost doesn't even matter because those who know it like clearly is doing
Yeah,
well and is clearly
yeah.
like doing what it's intended to do. Um, and so yeah, I don't even know if it like needs to be mainstream within running because the video reach that I saw through YouTube and Instagram, like it's reaching way more people than like most races that have like a golden ticket attached to it.
I think it draws a different person to the, because like, I'm sitting and I watch the Cocodona updates and the live stream and I watch Black Canyon, but as much as like I am competing at a high level in this lane, the sport isn't something that is exciting to me in the way that I think it is for like a mainstream like into it type of trail runner. Like I've got a buddy, Alex Proctor, who he was he set the course record at the Buffalo Run last year. And he is like in that lane of trail running scene. And so like part of my interest is just to see how he's doing in that sport, which draws me closer to some of the other races. But it is different because it like, yeah, there's many different sides of the sport that I think is only going to grow and create separation between like, okay, what sport is this compared to the others?
But if I were running the Backyard Ultra as an organizer, I would be thinking that it has potential to be way more exciting than a 100-mile race. That's a point to point race because the coverage, the broadcast is easier, right? You
Yeah.
have 4 miles you need to cover. You don't have 25 times the distance, and so you can set up three cameras and capture every runner, dozens or potentially hundreds of times. And there's way more room to fill with the actual runners. You can grab a 30-second soundbite as somebody is, back at their tent. "Hey, how's it going? Talk to me about how you're feeling. You're 40 hours in, how have things shaken out for you?" Whereas like that type of access does not exist at Cocodona, does not exist at Western States, does not exist at UTMB, that's for sure. And so from a like fan engagement standpoint, there's so much more opportunity, and running 4 miles, 4.16 is so much more accessible from like the layperson to understand, somebody who's not a
Yeah.
runner to understand like,
Yeah.
oh, that's like what I do when I go out for my, general fitness run, right? Like I'll
Yeah,
go for
yeah,
4 miles. Like I'm talking about like an average person who runs 2 or 3 times a week, and maybe they run 2 to 4 miles at a time for general health and fitness. Like they can conceptualize what you're doing when you go out and
yep,
do that single loop, and then the context of hmm, they did that 100 times, right? Like
yeah,
that's something that you might not be able to like understand it, but you can contextualize it. Whereas 100-mile run, you're like, oh, I don't even like driving that far. I can't picture what it's like to run 100 miles, right? Right?
yeah. Well, I think also what goes unnoticed built into the backyard is that the longer it goes, the more exciting it goes. So as you get closer to the end of the race, the interest increases in line with that, where it's like Cocodona, once you saw the first 10 finishers, you started to see the live stream drop off a cliff in terms of people paying attention. In some of these other races, like when you have a point to point finish line, the first place runner, like once you start to see those, podium finishes come in, people just lose interest. And so that's what I think is cool about the backyard is like, as the race goes on, it gets more and more exciting. The story builds even greater. And I think that's a unique part that like, yeah, you can really capitalize on the storytelling aspect of that compared to other races.
So are you picking your goals based on the ability to demonstrate what you're doing a la backyard ultra versus, I mean, you also have done quite well at Arrowhead, which is a fairly different format and probably too cold for you even to like take content with your phone. How do you think about like race selection?
So my buddy Alex that I mentioned, he was the one that recommended that I should get focused and narrow my focus on the backyard. He's like, "You're getting good at it. You should try and make the Team USA for 2026." And so it's only been recently over the last 6 to 8 months where I've been narrowing in on, okay, backyard ultra is going to be the chosen path that I take until I run out of interest in that sport. So when I think about race selection, I think about one, backyard ultra is sort of like my North Star as far as professional competitive aspect. But the Arrowhead and the backyard, what I'm learning through those races that maybe I wouldn't learn as much in a point to point race is that there's a aspect of reflection that I get during the race. Like playing college football, my coach had this saying that opportunities lost are never regained. And I always hated that slogan because it's like if you missed an interception, it went through your hands. It's like failure opportunity that opportunity is never coming again. And like it goes so quick that when the season ends and you no longer get the opportunity to play, you're sitting in the locker room crying with teammates like, holy smokes, where did all the time go? In a backyard ultra or an Arrowhead, I get to have that moment of reflection during the race. During BPN, I would lay on the trail and I would put my hand in or my head on my arm and I would think, this is so hard. But I want to put myself in 24 hours from now, Mark. If I decide that this is my last loop, I want to put myself in that chair and I want that Mark to ask this Mark, did you give everything you had? And the answer is no, I still have more to give. And like I love how I get to do that in the middle of a race and then make the decision to continue on. And so I'm trying to find ways where I get confronted with this point where I don't believe I can go any further. And then I get to have that dialogue with myself and either I fail or I don't. And then I get to bring those lessons back to people. So my race selection is a lot in line with, can I get to that place or do I think I can get to that place by going through this experience?
How does that translate to other parts of your life?
It helps me realize that one, the stresses in my life are very minimal compared to the hour 70 stresses of a backyard ultra. So I think that would be one. But I think going to that place and proving to myself that who I believe that I am is actually who I am, and I can make that decision to do that, just means that when doubt comes in my life right now, I've been married since October. We, we want to have a family, but there's all this uncertainty, there's all this doubt. And it's like, how do we come together to make decisions in spite of that doubt? I know I've done it. I've proven to myself out on the course that I can do that in this given situation. Now, when I feel scared or uncertain or filled with doubt in a personal situation with my wife, personal situation with a friend, I have the evidence that I can handle that situation by just taking the action that scares me most or the action that is the most painful. And a lot of times that's just facing it head on and having faith that through that decision, you'll find the light.
Yeah, I love the point about the discomfort in the sport is, kind of pales in comparison to the discomfort in life sometimes. A story I've shared on here a handful of times is a couple of years ago, I knew I was going to have an uncomfortable conversation at work, and I was run commuting that day. And so I decided to do an all out mile on my third mile into the office, or fourth mile into the office. And so I was like, 25, 30 minutes into my run. And I was like, I'm going to just suffer for 5 minutes, and nothing else I do today will be nearly as uncomfortable. And so I did. I ran, an all out mile. And then I walked into that room later that morning thinking about, the third quarter of that mile and how much it
Mm,
sucked. And I was like, nothing that happens in the next hour will be harder than what I just did. And I was right. And there's so much power in taking that friction, discomfort, whatever, and sitting with it and knowing that you can do it again. And as Courtney talks about, like, the pain cave is an ever expanding space the more time you spend in it, and you just get better at spending time in the increasingly large pain cave.
yeah. Yeah. And like your day-to-day life, for me at least, shows up in hour 60 of a backyard ultra. Like all of the ways in which I didn't keep the promises that I made to myself will show up on hour 60. And so it's a good
Meaning
reminder
like
for me.
self-doubt or things like that.
Yeah, or like remember that day 3 weeks ago when you only did half of the lift even though you could have done all 100% of, like, just like little things like that. Or you know, you said you would be home at this time and you got home 15 minutes later, or you were going to church or you're going to something and Lucy was waiting on you to get ready because you didn't like just little things of me getting lazy or just choosing comfort or complacency. Like those things will show up. Or if I go give a talk to a local high school team about it's important to make the hard decision in the hard moment. It's like, okay, well then when I get to hour 60, I better be able to make the hard decision in the so like all of those things come together to build for that moment. And when you get there, it's like you get to analyze without any of the other distractions if you've been keeping the promises, and or if you've been lying to yourself like, I didn't, I did half the lift, it's okay. Like that's easy for you to kind of justify on that day. But when you're suffering and you wish you did that other 50% because it would have helped you out there on that race, that's a moment where it's like, oh, okay, like I need to be a better man.
How does faith play into it for you?
It gives me the freedom. It gives me the freedom to explore without having the outcome determine my identity. Like running will be taken away from me. I don't know if it's today or 20 years from now, but there's not always going to be the attention or the success or the achievement around the things that I'm doing. And I got to be okay with that. And because I am growing a stronger faith and a stronger relationship with my faith, I can recognize that I can step away from running or step away from anything that I'm doing, and I'll be secure in that. My wife, when we were driving back from BPN, she just kind of recognized that like, oh, that fleeting, that was such a cool moment. Like it's starting to flee. And she just told me, she's like, Mark, there's going to be people that love you for what you just did and what you accomplish moving forward. And just know that myself and the people closest to you will always love you, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. And that comes from a place of us understanding what our foundation is in. And because I know I have that as a foundation in my home, I can explore any amount of darkness, any amount of pain, any amount of discomfort, and know that whatever happens out there, I can always come back to this light. And so it gives me the freedom to not focus on the outcome, but focus on giving everything I have until I can't go any further.
And then Nick whispers in your ear, "Go one more."
Yeah, yeah. Go one more. Exactly.
How does gratitude play into it for you?
Gratitude plays into it is like, I get the opportunity. Like I get the opportunity to do all of these things. I talked about it at work the other week where I was washing windows. It's like, I'm blessed with the opportunity to do something where I get to make money and do something outside and do it with a friend of mine. I try and Gratitude for me is like not looking at, I have to do this, but I get to, in all aspects of my life. And it's hard. I have to remind myself of that on a daily basis. But the more I can lean into the I get to, the more I start to see everything as an opportunity for being as present as I possibly can in the moment and seeing everybody around me as a person to uplift in that moment.
Mark, what's firing you up in running these days?
The growth in backyard, I think, is super cool. Coming out the back end of BPN, the amount of people that are signing up, like hundreds of DMs of like, I've signed up for this, like, how should I train for this? That they've never run a marathon before. I think that is the most exciting thing for me, is seeing how this sport is really growing, where it's like trail running, ultra running, and the different umbrella or the different streams underneath the umbrella, I think will only grow the sport. Um, so just like the amount of attention and interest that people are having in it right now is really monumental. So much so that, like, my sisters back home, they love watching reality TV, and I think there's a lot more drama happening in the sport because of like the competitors that are showing up to races and the storylines that are being told, and like they see what I do. They don't think running's that interesting, but they'll like get all hyped around the storylines of different competitors showing up to races. So just think the growth of the overall sport.
Mark, appreciate the chat. Where can we find you if we want to follow along with your adventures?
Yeah, on Instagram and YouTube, Mark.Dowdle. Those are probably the two best places to find me. Yeah.
Awesome.
Appreciate you having me on.
What races can we find you at this year?
Oh, okay. Well, I got Mid-State Mile coming up in June. Harvey Lewis and I are gonna be kind of going to war at Mid-State Mile. And Mid-State Mile is a 1 mile loop every 20 minutes with 350 feet of elevation gain.
Oh my
So
God.
it's a last person standing, but it's a little different than we're used to. And then I've got Big's backyard coming up in October. And then we're doing a number of other like group events. I really want to help encourage and grow the sport in the way that I know how. And so in July, we'll be doing a 24-hour backyard simulation and just encourage people to show up and go as far as they can go, even if it's, show up for the first 3 hours and then get some rest and come back and show up for another 3. We just want to get people out and moving.
Cool. Love it. Mark, great to chat, and we'll see you out there.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.